You old wreck. Clear off the flight line and take your antiques to the museum. Arthur Finch, aged 83, stands alone in the gray light beside a Typhoon parked on the tarmac. He moves with small, precise gestures. A cloth over aluminium. Hands slow but steady. The base smells of diesel and cold metal. Young mechanics loiter with mugs and laughter, their boots scuffing the concrete. One of them flicks a rag toward Arthur and calls him a relic, as if ridicule could erase his steady work. Arthur does not look up. He wipes at a seam, fingers following rivets like a practiced reader tracing a line of text. A faded B-17 patch peeks from beneath the cuff of his jacket, where the thread has thinned to nearly nothing. He hums a tune with no words, a rhythm older than anyone watching. The wind tugs at his gray coat and slips under his collar. The Typhoon towers over him like a parked beast, its belly reflecting the thin light. Why does he bother at all when the aircraft are modern and untouchable to him? A young airwoman pauses with a toolbox and watches him for a moment. She tilts her head, curiosity threading through the mocking faces around her. Arthur speaks softly under his breath, and the sound hangs beneath the wing. The diagnostic panel on the Typhoon blinks once, although no one touched it. A mechanic frowns and says nothing, as if a small mystery has nudged at their certainty. They return to their tasks with glances that do not quite reach him. Arthur recalls a name without sounding it out loud. His hands remember a sequence of checks like muscle memory, kept alive in tendon and bone. He moves from tail to nose with the slow economy of someone who has done far greater things than polish an aircraft. A distant roar of a training jet takes the edge off the morning quiet. Pilots run through their pre-flight checks down the line and the base breathes into action. Arthur watches them with a blank face, eyes that have measured many skies. Is it possible for a piece of metal to hold memory in the way a body can hold a scar? Colonel Reeves drives up in a small official vehicle, the tires clicking over drain covers. He steps out with a clipboard and a stern look, the patterned gait of an officer who earns his presence by the strictness of his face. He sees Arthur at once, and his mouth tightens. The colonel asks who authorized the man to be so close to the flight line. A nearby sergeant repeats the order to clear the area, and the laughter starts again. Arthur straightens slowly and lifts his head so the colonel can see his face. His eyes are a soft, pale blue, and they do not flinch. He clears his throat and says the line does not need permission to be honored. The words sit in the air, small and stubborn. The colonel strides forward, and his glance catches the patch where Arthur had tucked the cuff. He stops mid-step because the emblem is the exact insignia his father once wore, the B-17 crest with the faded motto beneath. The clipboard drops a fraction as the colonel's control slips for a heartbeat. A memory flickers across the colonel's face that is not his own, but inherited, the shape of an absent man in a photograph. There is a pause so sudden, it sounds like the hush before a signal light changes. Arthur folds his hands and waits, as if he had been expecting that pause all along. If a man has been named missing for 80 years, can he come back as a memory in a coat and still be recognized by the sons of those who remembered him? The sergeant moves to escort Arthur away, but the colonel raises a hand. He does not yet speak the command he had prepared, because recognition makes everything more complicated than procedure. Arthur lowers his gaze, and the old patch rests against his heart like a small, pleading relic. They stand on the cold concrete, with metal birds beside them, and the base around them humming with routine. Arthur tells a short sentence about Flight 92 and how some missions were erased, not because they failed, but because they had to be kept secret. No one answers except the wind that moves papers on the clipboard and the distant shudder of an engine. If you want me to continue to part 2, say continue now. The colonel folds his arms and looks at the man who has more histories under his sleeves than the base archive. He asks Arthur how he knows the old aircraft so well, and Arthur simply points to the seams where the rivets have been hammered and tempered by hands he will not name. The morning tightens, as if the base itself is leaning in to hear what the old man will say next. The alarm cuts through the base before the sun clears the horizon. It is not the sharp drill bell, but the heavier note that means something real. Arthur looks up from the rag in his hand and watches the tower lights flash red across the mist. A training jet is returning with smoke pouring from its tail. The crew scatter to their posts, voices sharp and overlapping. Colonel Reeves grabs a radio, shouting orders across the line, but there is hesitation in the motion of his team. Arthur drops the cloth and starts walking. No one stops him this time. He moves past the fuel truck, past the loading carts, straight toward the noise. The jet hits the runway too fast and veers to the side. The tires explode. One wing scrapes. Sparks trail in a crooked line. Arthur reaches the emergency fence and ducks under before the guards react. He waves to the fire crew to hold position and signals left. Short, precise gestures. Reeves sees him from the control hut and hesitates. Arthur's directions are so exact that the vehicles adjust their route without question. The jet spins once more and halts with the canopy locked. Flames lick the intake. Arthur climbs onto the fuselage, coughing into his sleeve. A young pilot inside is pounding the glass, eyes wide, helmet fogged. Arthur slams a release latch that should only exist on older models. Metal creaks and the canopy shifts enough to break the seal. Why does he know where every bolt hides when he has never worked on these machines? The fire crew reach the wing with foam cannons. Arthur leans in, unfastens the harness, and drags the pilot out by the shoulders. He stumbles backward, feet slipping on fuel, and they both fall to the concrete. Reeves runs across the line, shouting his name as though suddenly sure of it. Arthur grips the pilot's wrist until the medic arrives. The skin of his own hands is gray from smoke and age, but the grip does not loosen. The colonel kneels beside him and asks how he knew those procedures. Arthur shakes his head and mutters that some things do not need remembering because they never left. The colonel stares, and for a brief second he sees another face superimposed on Arthur's. A photograph come to life. The air smells of burnt oil and wet foam. The Typhoon. He polished earlier stands untouched at the edge, gleaming faintly in the pale light. Arthur looks toward it and whispers something too low for the rest to hear. The crew clear the area while medics wheel the pilot away. Arthur stays seated on the ground, watching the horizon instead of the wreck. Reeves removes his gloves and crouches down again. He tells Arthur he should not have been here at all, but the words sound empty now. Arthur replies that a man should be where the noise is until it ends. The colonel nods, unsure whether he agrees or simply accepts the truth in it. Later, when the tarmac cools and the smoke fades, Reeves orders a search through personnel files. Arthur Finch is listed as temporary maintenance. Contracted 6 months ago. No date of birth. No national insurance number. Only an address that leads to a memorial estate. The colonel sits in his office, long after dark. He reads a faded logbook from his father's things, the one he never threw away. Inside the back cover, a note in pencil. Arthur Finch, Flight 92, last seen over the Channel, 1944. He shuts the book and stares at the airfield lights through the window. Is it possible for time to loop back, for duty to refuse release? Next morning, the mechanics whisper. One says the old man saved the pilot and then vanished during cleanup. Another swears she heard a voice in the static saying, "Hold the line." Reeves walks the edge of the runway at dawn, frost crunching under his boots. He finds a small object half buried in soot, the metal warped and dark. It is a service medal, wings engraved with the number 92. He turns it in his palm until the light catches. A breeze moves across the flight line, carrying the faint echo of propellers that no longer exist. The colonel stands still, hearing words that are not spoken. Hold steady. Lads, bring her home. Why does the past refuse to stay buried on this strip of concrete? He presses the medal into his pocket and looks toward the silent Typhoon. Its lights blink twice, then settle. Reeves murmurs a quiet thank you into the cold air, because there is nothing else to say. Back in the control room, The tower officer reports clear skies for the day. Reeves nods, voice steady again, but his hand stays in his pocket, touching the metal like a secret pulse. He orders a maintenance record created for Arthur Finch, veteran volunteer, to remain on file permanently. The line outside hums to life with morning drills and engine tests. Men move, orders fly. Yet somewhere between the noise there is a thread of quiet, the sound of an old whisper running through metal, and for a moment, everyone feels the weight of being watched by something benevolent, unseen. Would the sky remember the men who built its courage if the living stopped listening? Night falls quiet over RAF Brenton. The floodlights hum, throwing long silver bars across the empty tarmac. Colonel Reeves stands alone beside the Typhoon that Arthur once polished. The aircraft seems almost alive beneath the light, its metal breathing in the cold air. Reeves takes the medal from his pocket and lays it gently on the wing. The engraved wings catch the reflection of the tower beacon. The colonel speaks softly, saying he searched every archive, every registry. There is no trace of a living Arthur Finch, only a missing report from 1944, marked presumed dead. He remembers his father's stories about Flight 92, the bomber lost over the channel, its radio gone silent mid-rescue. He can still hear the voice in those stories. It was the same quiet steadiness he heard from Arthur on the runway. A gust moves through the field, stirring dust into little spirals. The Typhoon's navigation lights flicker twice, though no power runs to the circuit at this hour. Reeves watches, not afraid this time, only respectful. He bends to the tarmac and sees faint marks near the hangar fence, footprints where none should be. The prints lead to the service gate and fade into the darkness beyond. No one saw him leave. No vehicle departed. Why does every goodbye sound the same when it comes from someone who has already gone once before? Morning breaks again, pale and steady. Reeves calls the maintenance crew for a short assembly by the line. They gather, still uncertain how to speak of the event without sounding foolish. He holds up the medal and tells them the airfield owes a life to a man who never stopped serving. There is no ceremony, no anthem, just silence filled with engine echoes. He asks the crew to remember that respect is not written in ranks or records. Later that day, two mechanics fix a brass plaque beside the Typhoon's parking spot. It reads simply, "Captain Arthur Finch, Keeper of the Sky." The letters catch the afternoon light like small stars nailed to the ground. A pilot passing by asks who Captain Finch was. One of the younger crew replies that he was the man who cleaned the Typhoon last week. The pilot frowns, unsure if it is a joke or not. Reeves stands a few paces back, hands behind his back. He does not correct anyone. Sometimes truth does not need defending. As the sun lowers, the base quiets again. From the far end of the runway, a light aircraft lifts off for evening training. Its shadow glides over the plaque like a silent salute. Reeves watches until the sound fades into height. He whispers the phrase that has echoed through every retelling of Flight 92. "Hold the line." The wind answers, moving gently through the tied-down covers of the idle planes. For a moment, the metal skin of the Typhoon vibrates, not from the wind, but from something older. The crew glance at each other and say nothing. Can memory be a kind of presence that refuses to let go? Night folds over again. The airfield lights blink in sequence, a pattern that could almost be Morse. Too short, one long, too short again. Reeves looks up from his office window and smiles faintly. He writes a final note in the daily report. Unexplained electrical interference. Resolved itself. No further action required. Then he closes the file on Arthur Finch, leaves the medal in the drawer, and switches off the lamp. The window glass holds the reflection of a man standing beside a Typhoon, shoulders straight, head bowed. When Reeves turns to look, the space is empty again. Outside, the base returns to routine, and the endless hum of readiness, the sound of jets breathing on leashes. But beneath it all, in the hush between rotations. Something gentle hums, the rhythm of an old bomber engine at peace. Because respect, once earned, never retires. The next morning, a fresh recruit polishing the Typhoon swears he hears a voice just above the wind, low and calm. He pauses, cloth in hand, eyes wide, heart still. The voice says only 2 words. Stand steady. He looks around but finds no one there. He finishes the task with care, every movement precise, the way he imagines Arthur once did. When he steps back, the Typhoon gleams like it has just remembered who it is. How many guardians walk beside us without ever asking to be seen? Thank you so much for spending your time with this story today. If it touches your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. It helps more people discover these quiet moments of courage. I'd truly love to hear your thoughts, so please leave a comment below and join the discussion. Your perspective always adds something special to this community. See you in the next story, and I wish you all the best for the days ahead. Stay kind, stay steady,